So if you hate edge banding with an absolute passion, and you like really cool tools that do what they're supposed to do, and you're not offended by super expensive tools, then you need to watch this video because I'm gonna show you the best tool that Festool makes that almost nobody owns. And that is this, the Festool Conturo edge banding machine. I'm gonna walk you through everything you need to know about it, pretty much everything you need to know, and show you exactly how it works and show you just why this is the best tool for this application. And I'll be honest with you, I have absolutely no business owning this tool as a hobbyist in my shop. However, it is my favorite tool that I own. Over the past few years, I have been running the demo on this at a tool show called JLC. It is in Rhode Island. It is every March. If you've never been, I would strongly suggest you go. It's a really fun show. But I demo the Conturo. And the most common question that I get, and the reason why I'm doing this video, is, what is that? Is it a new tool from Festool? And here's the funny thing. This was released in 2012. So why do people not know about it? Well, one, not a lot of people own it. Two, there isn't a lot of content talking about it. And three, it's expensive, and that's probably why you don't see the other two. But today I'm gonna show you exactly how this works, how good of a job it does, and then you can make the determination in whether or not something like this would be right for you in your shop or your business. Now, the first thing that we need to do, obviously, is plug this in or else we're not gonna be able to use the tool. Now, to turn this thing on, there's one very important thing, and that is the power button is right here. It's green, just like everything else on Festool. When you turn this on, you have to hold the button. If I just press it once, it actually won't turn on. So you gotta hold it down, and then you're gonna hear it turn on. So, this machine takes about 8 minutes to get up to temperature. So we're just gonna go ahead and wait those 8 minutes together. No, I'm just kidding. But I can bring you in and show you all the other cool things about the screen while it's warming up. Okay, so you see it flashing right now. That means, one, you can't use the machine. You've got to wait for the process, for it to actually warm up all the way. So there's a few different things that you can change on this. So each one of these has a function. So if I click here, mode, and if you look right above mode, it says 4:01. That's how much time is remaining for it to completely warm up. So if I hit mode, it gives me the ability to change the amount of glue. So you see less glue, more glue to go left or right. You simply push these arrows here, and when you're done, you can go ahead and lock that in. I can also change the temperature. Why would you want to change the temperature? Well, maybe I'm going from hardwood edge banding, which I'm going to put on around 370, and now I'm going to go to PVC, which then you have to turn the temperature down because it does have a tendency to make the PVC melt or curl when you're applying it. So that's kind of nice that you can adjust the temperature. So if we go past the temperature, we can do Fahrenheit or Celsius. For all of you metric folk, you can do feet or you can do meters. So if I go here, it's going feet. I can change it to meters if I want to. Anytime you change a setting, you gotta make sure that you hit OK. So going with the feet or meters, that's what this up top is for. That's showing you approximately how many more linear feet of glue you have left before you need to replace or add glue. Right here inside of this window, you see this plunger mechanism, and you see that right there. That is actually one of the glue pucks. Here I've got an additional extra one. They do make these glue pucks in 4 colors. This is the standard like tan color. They have white, black, and also like a dark brown that you can choose from. So if we wanted to add glue, we would simply push this button here. And as you can see on the inside of this window, we don't want to open this up just yet, but on the inside of this window, you see that plunger mechanism. It's going to retract all the way back, which is going to give us space to place a new glue puck. So let's wait for that to happen. Now, once it has reached the entire way, it'll tell you, open up the top. I open it up, I take my glue puck, place it in there, close it, and I purposely left it away from the other glue because I want to show you what's happening. And that is the plunger is now pushing it in to the existing glue. Once it's achieved where it needs to go, now you can look at it and see that we now have 59 feet. One thing I will say about this measurement is that it's definitely more than that. I've always felt like this is very low, but I've put a lot more linear feet through this machine than what it typically says on here. And that will change if I decide to put less glue. Now it says 73, 78. If I go more glue, okay, I only have 46. So we'll just go back to roughly where I was, right there. Okay, lock it in. So that is all of the settings within the screen itself. All right, we have achieved the temperature, so this thing is ready to use, but I'm gonna still show you a few more features about this. So right here we have a switch 1 and 2. This is basically so you can use presets. So before I was talking about going from hardwood edge banding to, say, PVC edge banding to use on melamine. I could have setting number 1 at all of the settings that I need for hardwood, and then I could simply switch it to number 2, have those presets, and just go between the machine that way. Power button, which I've already shown you. This right here raises and lowers this piece here, which is where the edge banding will feed through. And I would like to highlight, so this is the KA65, so just like all Festool products, that number means something. So the capacity on this is 65 millimeters, so a little over 2 inches. That means that I can use edge banding that is that tall. So if I had 2 pieces of, melamine or plywood that were sandwiched together to give me an 1.5 inch thick look, I can use 1.5 inch edge banding just like this. This is, just over 3/4, 7/8. So it adjusts easily to whatever size edge banding you're using, and the capacity is really, really big. Now, this right here is for the purge, and I'm not gonna do that as part of this video, but if I wanted to change out the color, I would simply depress this trigger and it will allow it to go all the way down and activate the purge method, which basically you would just take out whatever glue you have in there, put the new color in, it would purge all the glue that's in the machine, and once you see the new color coming out, then you're good to go. So let's go ahead and raise this up to roughly where it needs to go, because I'm going to show you how to set the edge banding. Right here we have a small little glue catch. So this is where like residue and everything will end up catching. This does have a tendency to fall out from time to time just because it's rubber, so if you bang it, it could fall off. It's not an issue. You might just find some of these little droplets on the ground. That just sits in there just like that. And then this plate right here is actually what rides on the material. And this actually does not stay on there when it's in the sustainer. This simply comes down just like this. And when you need to put it in, when you're getting the machine set up, you just have to line it up with the holes, press up, and you want to make sure that it is tight. You don't want it to have any gap, so you want metal to metal contact. So we're gonna pinch here like this. I typically will do this before I turn the machine on and it starts to get really hot. You lock that down, and now we know this handle is good to go. Now, while I do this demo, I'm going to be using, this is just some scrap 3/4 inch or 18 millimeter Baltic birch, and I've got some 1 millimeter thick edge banding. This is hardwood edge banding. It is not glued, right? So a lot of people that are buying edge banding, they're going out and they're buying, 1/2 mil or less pre-glued. They're using an iron, which there's nothing wrong with that. You can get great results, but it's a tedious process. It's not an enjoyable process. And quite honestly, it just doesn't add the same protection as this. And it also doesn't adhere to the surface nearly as good. So people will look at 1 millimeter thick edge banding and go, why would I use that? I'll just cut my own hardwood strips. Also, you can do that. This is actually very stout, and it will actually do a very good job of protecting the edge. And when looking at it from the front, you would never even know that that was on there. Most people would not. Woodworkers would. But to get my current length, or the length that I need, I'm just going to go roughly 4 fingers from the end on both sides. You can do less as you get used to the machine. However, there's a little bit of a learning curve to using this machine when you first start. So just to be safe, we'll just go a little bit extra on both sides. And for the edge banding, I'm just going to break it. Why? Because it's going to get cut anyways. It doesn't matter. Now to stop this thing from blowing up in my face, just use a spring clamp, set it off to the side. So now we have our piece of edge banding. Now when it comes to the edge banding, so this is 18 millimeter thick material. This right here, this edge banding is, I want to say it's 7/8, so it's roughly 22 mil. You want to make sure that you don't get too overboard with the amount on the top and the bottom, right? The overhang is what we'll call it. The reason for that is when I show you how the router works, it can actually affect the ability to get a perfect cut the very first time. So you don't need to go crazy overboard, but at the same time, you don't want to go exact, right? So you want to be a little bit more. 18 mil ply, I'm using 22 mil edge banding. Now, a common question that I get asked, so I'll go ahead and address it now, is where do I get my edge banding from? I get it from a company called Edgeco. I believe they're out of New York or New Jersey. I may be wrong about that. I've always had really good success with them. I've always gotten a really good product. And the first time you order, they send you like this little fan thing that has every color, every wood species. You literally can get anything you want in pretty much whatever size you want. So if I wanted 50 millimeter tall, maple edge banding that's 1.5 millimeters thick, I could absolutely get it there. So I believe you have to set up an account with them, which is pretty easy to do, but check it out. Edgeco, I'll leave a link in the video description if you want to go to their website. Check it out. I don't know what their requirements are to setting up an account. Okay, so we've got our piece ready. Let me bring you in close and show you how we load it in the machine. As I stated before, in order to put this edge banding in the machine, it's got to go through here. So you'll see a groove here, a little channel, and a channel up here. That's how your edge banding goes. And then also, whatever face you want to touch the material, that's the face that goes away from the machine itself. I always kind of just follow the curve of the edge banding. So we're going to go and put this in here. I'm going to put it all the way up, and now it's tight. I cannot pull it out. If I pulled hard enough, I would, but that's too tight for it to feed through the machine. So once we get it nice and tight, we're going to back off 2 clicks. Now it goes in and out of the machine very easily. So to load this into the machine, that's what this button right here at the top is. When I push this, it's going to bring it into the machine just a little bit, and it will stop. So it will look just like this. Push the button. It's ready to go. It's ready to be used. The only thing that I have not shown you is this switch right here. And this just gives you the ability to switch between 2 speeds. And if you look at the top that I was showing you earlier, as you push this button, it'll go from slow to fast, right? And both of them are very slow. If you're trying to get used to the machine, I recommend you put it on 1 arrow, and if you're comfortable with the machine, 2 arrows. And there are some certain circumstances like radius, which I'll talk about, where you might want to go slow. Now let's put this on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this plate roughly near the end of the material. There is an indicator line on this plate. That is your guide to be roughly on the end of the material. Now, you'll also see that I do not have this pushed all the way up to the material because I've got to let the edge banding come through the machine. So all I'm doing, I'm looking down in this window here, and I am making sure that this is roughly lined up with the end. I'm also making sure that my piece of edge banding sits freely on top. Another common question that I've gotten, well, what if you have a really long piece? I've done all the way up to 8-foot pieces like this. They do make a basket that will allow you to hold really long pieces so it's not dangling. But for the most part, for me and my applications, setting it on top here is more than suitable. So once I have it off the machine, a couple of things to highlight. You don't want it to balance like this. You want it to sit flat on the surface. So that's what this handle is for. The next thing is if you look right here, this is a roller guide. This is actually what is driving the machine. I am not pulling it. I am not pushing it. This is going to be pressed against this, and this is going to be pressed against this. So there's only 2 things that you need to make sure that you do while you're doing this. Downward pressure here, keeping it steady, and not like this, not like this. And forward pressure, allowing that wheel to engage and not only drive the machine, but it's also applying pressure to the glue. To start this, it's the same button on top that you use to feed the material in. So I'm going to press the button here. I'm going to visually watch to make sure that it clears the end, which it does. And as you can see, all I'm doing right now is keeping it steady. I have this hand free. I'm coming off to the end. When I get to the end, I want to make sure that I come straight off. I don't want to drop the weight and do this because that's going to pull down the edge banding and it could potentially ruin it. Something that I want to highlight here is as soon as this is on, there is no getting it off, okay? If you have to get this off, you're going to end up having to cut it at a table saw. It's happened to me before. Something happened, I wasn't paying attention, and as soon as it's on there, it's already drying. So I can already take this and pull it off, and it will break on this edge. So now, obviously, this is not going to be a clean edge. I'm going to save this side to make the cut so you can see how that works. But I want to bring you in real close and show you just why this machine is so effective. So this is why this machine is such a great machine. This is what the machine is doing. It is applying the glue to the edge banding, but it's not just applying glue in a sloppy manner. It's applying them in perfectly spaced, exactly even lines all the way across. Why is that important, and why is this so much more durable than iron-on edge banding? It's because the minute that I apply pressure to the back side of this, it allows that glue to completely flatten out, giving you 100% glue coverage. Once it's on, it's not coming off. You have to cut it off. So that is why this edge banding machine is such a remarkable tool, because of how it applies the glue to the edge banding. Obviously, I'm not going to break both sides off. We need to make sure that we cut it. If you get the accessory kit, which I would strongly suggest, like you kind of need to have the accessory kit. It comes with a lot of great things, especially if you do a lot of melamine stuff, but this cutter comes with it, and it operates just like this. Now you'll see this open slot here. It gives you the ability to do 65 millimeters. So I can cut flush any edge banding. The way that this works, this slides onto the end just like this. Got to make sure you have enough space in between. And all I have to do is make sure it's nice and tight up against the material. I press this, and it gives me a perfectly flush cut to the end of the material. Now what we have on the top and bottom is a little bit of extra material, roughly 2 millimeters, because before I said 18, I use 22 mil edge banding, so it gives me about 2 millimeters. So we need to trim that, okay? A common question when I was doing the demos, or before I would do the demos, or every time I demo this, somebody always asks, is it cutting at the same time? It's like, well, no, because this is a handheld machine. It is meant to apply the edge banding. However, Festool has an entire system that revolves around getting you this perfect edge, right? And the next step is to trim it, okay? So we've already trimmed the ends, or broke one off, trimmed the other, just to show you the two differences. So now we need to trim it. And that's where the MFK 700 router from Festool comes in. Now there are a couple of different options for how you can trim this edge banding. You can do it in a vertical fashion. So they have the regular vertical base that has special bits that are used to do this. Typically, from my experience, the only time I would use one of those is if I was using a little bit thicker edge banding and I'm trying to get some sort of rounded profile. But in terms of like trying to cut this thing flush, I haven't had as good of success with that. But to be fair, I just don't have a ton of experience using it that way. I have always used it with the 1.5 degree horizontal, vertical's the other way, the horizontal base. Now, this doesn't come standard if you were to just buy the MFK, but if you buy the MFK 700 set, it does come with the 1.5 degree base. They also make a 0 degree base. Now, you might be asking, like, what does it mean, 1.5 degree, 0 degree base, whatever. So think of it like this. I'm gonna do this in a very extreme manner, okay? So 1.5 degree base basically means that it's actually cutting like this, right? Not that much, 1.5 degrees, is where a 0 degree would be absolutely perfect 90 on the 1 millimeter or 1.5 millimeter thick edge banding, whatever you're using, 2 mil. A lot of that's dictated on whether or not, what kind of material it is, which I'll talk about here in a minute. I will very quickly show you how to set this up because it is quite simple, even though people tend to overcomplicate this process. But because this has such fine adjustment via this knob, it makes it really, really simple. So what you're trying to achieve is this plate needs to be perfectly in line with the cutter head in order to give perfectly flush cuts. This bearing right here rides against the material. This connects to the router via 2 screws right here, and the bearing actually slides back and forth. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to set my bearing. Now I only really need about 2 to 3 millimeters of cut length from the edge of here to where my bearing starts, because we don't need to utilize the entire cutter in order to make the cut. So we'll just set that here. Then you'll notice that I have my single flute here. It's a 2-flute bit, but I have this in line with the top. Then you can do something like this and take one of the glue pucks and you just bring it directly up to that bearing, and you can see I only have about 2 millimeters of cutter length. Now, the reason I'm using this puck is because I know the puck is flat and I can get a really good visual of if I'm in line. And the best way to do this is to just hold it up to a light and see if you can see any light coming through. And then that's where these fine adjustments come in so handy. So you would loosen this knob and make tiny little adjustments here until you didn't see any light. And then from there, you can actually dial it in when we cut, which is exactly what we're gonna do. I would say that this is the one thing that people struggle with the most, is getting a good feel for riding this bearing, me included. When I first started, it felt kind of silly, because what I would do is, you can hear it. Okay, that bearing is up against the material. When I get to the edge, right, I'm not starting like this, right? Because then you're trying to lower this thing down, it doesn't work. It is meant to be used just like this. This is my pivot point. This is what's keeping it flat to the surface. I turn the machine on, I'm gonna come to the end, that bearing is going to turn the corner, and it's gonna allow me to make that cut perfectly flush. But first I wanna test this to make sure, one, it's not cutting too deep. If it's cutting too shallow, I can adjust that on the fly. So let's check it out. Now what I was just doing is I was just testing the top of this board. You know, I would always do this prior to starting a project. I do it on a piece of scrap wood, make sure everything's dialed in. But that's how I test it. Once it's set, I've never really had to adjust it unless I drop it and it gets out of whack. But or I do like I did today and completely redid it. So I know I'm not cutting in the material. That means that I definitely at least will not cut into the material when I cut the edge banding. So let's just see where we're at. Now remember, I'm gonna come here, you're gonna see me pivot on this handle, and I'm just gonna ride the corner. Now that's pretty dang close on the first try. However, if I use my fingernail, I've got just a little bit of a lip. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna turn this ever so slightly, just a little bit deeper. Now you see what happened? All that extra fuzz that was there, that actually started to cut into that and remove that. But I don't know, I'm pretty dang close, but just because I can, let's just go a little bit more. Now again, I think I'm still leaving a little bit of glue residue, and I really want to get rid of that if I can. Now most of this is just going to wipe right off, but as I run my finger, the only thing that I'm feeling is that actual glue. So you could really dial this thing in. And I think that's it. I think that is right where I need to be. I don't have to touch it again. I've still got a little bit of glue residue from the seam. However, I'm going to show you exactly what we do to get that cleaned up now. The next thing I'm going to show you is also part of the accessory kit, and it's a small little carbide scraper. It's got a flat edge, and then it's got a notch that says 1, 1.5, and 2. Now the notches are especially helpful when you're doing PVC edge banding and you're trying to give it a slight little rounded profile. It'll work really well for that because it'll just cut through it like it's nothing. However, I find that you do not want to use those with hardwood, in my experience, because it splinters and grabs too easily. So all I'm trying to do is use the flat surface. Now think of this as a carbide scraper just like you would use for anything else, only I'm going to use it slightly different, but the idea is the same. We're trying to take off a very slight amount of material. So what ends up happening, and obviously you can't feel this because you're not, here in my shop, even though I wish you were. You're not here in my shop. There'll be little glue residue, small inconsistencies because, plywood's not perfectly flat. So anything that plate rides, it follows the contours of the plywood. And when I say inconsistencies, I'm talking like a tiny little thing of glue. That's where this comes in really helpful. So when I get done making my cut, I'll take this and just put it at a slight angle, meaning I'm not laying it perfectly flat on the material, which you can. I like to lift mine up just a little bit, and then I just pull it towards me. And what this is doing is it's cleaning up any remaining imperfections, and then it gives me an absolutely perfect glue line. That's it. So what would we do from here? Well, the next thing we would do is we would flip this thing over and we would cut again, right? And go through that exact same process. So that's how you apply the edge banding. There is one more thing that I like to do. The accessory kit also comes with these hand sanding blocks. I believe it comes with like 320 grit paper. You can put whatever paper on there you want. All I like to do here is do a quick pass, not only on the flat, when it's not pre-finished. If this was pre-finished, I would not do that. Okay, but this is not pre-finished. So you could actually do this instead of the scraper if you didn't want to go through that process. But what that's doing is smoothing everything out. Then I'm going to take it at a slight angle, and all I'm doing here is I'm taking off that really, really sharp edge that it's going to create from cutting it with the router. So now I have this beautiful, beautiful edge on this material. I can do the same thing to the other side. And then once you get going with this in a system like repetitive over and over and over again, it's amazing how quickly you can get this done. I've also found what's really great is a lot of times, like let's say this was a door panel, I might do the top and bottom first and do both ends, set it off to the side and stack them. And then I can come back and trim them all and do the same task over and over and over again. So a lot like you were doing any cabinet related thing. But this will give you an absolutely flawless, wonderful edge that, one, will be way stronger than putting on the iron-on edge banding, but also it's just going to look a lot better. It's easier to cut. I know a lot of people out there have probably tried doing iron-on edge banding and then they use the fast cap cutter, and not all of them are created equal. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't. The blades dull very quickly. It can kind of be a pain in the butt. I mean, theoretically, you could use one of those on this, but they probably wouldn't even cut through this glue. So the amount of glue that goes on this is significant compared to other methods. So let me go ahead and trim up this other side, going through the exact same process, and then we'll take a look at what it looks like. For this next part, I want to talk about some of the other capabilities that this thing has, and maybe share a few tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. But What ends up happening if you go a while without using the machine, it'll go into an automatic cool down mode. And what you hear, let's see if I can get close. That fan, which I'm sure you've probably heard periodically throughout this video, that's the cool down procedure. So this was at 370 degrees about 5 to 8 minutes ago. This thing started to go down into a cool down mode. So currently the fan is cooling it down. It's currently sitting at 230 degrees. So this will continue to happen all the way until the machine is turned off, right? Or I can just hold the power button down and shut it off. Now I didn't do it there, I just pressed it once. Because what I wanted to highlight for you is that right now, the screen is now again orange, which means I cannot use the machine. Why? Because it's not at the temperature that it needs to be. So when it goes into a cool down mode while you're using it, say you're trimming up a bunch of panels and you need to come back and edge band a bunch of panels, there's a chance you may have to come over, press that button once, it'll beep like you heard, it'll get back up to the temperature that it needs to get to, and then you're able to use it. When the screen turns green, oh, look at that, I'm a poet and didn't even know it. When the screen turns green, you'll be good to go, you can use it, and it's fine. For this, because it's making that noise, if I just wanted to shut it off, I hold it down, it's still hot, it's still gonna cool down, it's just not gonna be running on the fan. That leads me to my next thing. A lot of people ask, what's the cleanup like for this? That's it. That was literally it. I can put this thing off to the side now, I can set this up here, walk away, it'll come down, it'll cool, and in 3 months, I can come back out, I can plug it in, turn it on, and as long as I'm using that same glue color, which 95% of the time I use the tan, I'll turn it on, 8 minutes later, I'm ready to use it. That's the cleanup, right? You don't have to clean out a bunch of pellets, and I know this will come up. Can you use other types of glue? No. Those glue pucks right here are machined exactly the size of that opening that they go into, so you must use the Festool glue. I bought a box of these like 3 years ago, and I still have lots of glue left, and I surprisingly use this machine a lot, like way more than typical hobbyists should. But I do a lot of frameless cabinetry for the house, and I like edge banding. So that's a huge benefit, is the lack of cleaning. Another big benefit, I can do radius, right? I can do external radius, and I can do internal radius. And this is the one thing that, I talk to a lot of guys at JLC specifically. It is a contractor, it is a remodeler show, right? It is a home building show, so you'll get a lot of contractors, you'll get a lot of remodelers, you'll get a lot of home builders, cabinet makers, those kind of things. I've had a lot of guys tell me like, well, why would I need that? I have a floor standing machine. And the question that I always ask is, can you do radius? Can you do internal or external radius? And the first thing they say is, well, no. And they know where I'm going with it. That's a huge benefit to this machine. That paired with the fact that there is no real cleanup involved. Heck, you could buy 4 of these for less than the price of one standing edge banding machine, have 4 people edge banding, give you the capability, or you could have one that has every color in it. I've seen that happen before. People bought multiple just to keep different colors in it and not have to worry about it. These are businesses. These are not people like you and me that are working out of a shop, just basically doing stuff for your house. But it's a possibility. But then it gives you the extra ability to do external radiuses and internal. Now, there are some limitations on an internal radius, like you see here. 2 inches, 50 millimeters is, I believe, the space needed in order to actually get the roller engaged and be able to utilize that space. So a very, very tight internal radius. And on an external radius, as low as 25 to 30 millimeters, so 1 inch to 1 inch and 1/8. This is obviously a much larger external radius here. This is really just for doing demonstrations. Just because that's the ability of the machine does not mean that you're going to get that in every single scenario. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. If I was using 2 millimeter thick hardwood edge banding, I probably wouldn't get perfect results on a 25 millimeter external radius. Why? Because the thicker it gets, the more brittle it's going to be, the more rigid it's going to be. That's actually a contradiction. How can it be brittle and rigid? The more rigid it's going to be, but it could break easier because of that, because it's such a tight radius. As where You could use 2 mil to 3 mil thick PVC edge banding on melamine and achieve the abilities. The numbers I'm giving you are what the machine is capable of. It does not mean that it's capable of that with every single material. So just understand that. Now, something that I didn't even cover is the fact that, so the table that you see here is a multifunction table, MFT, commonly referred to as, for those of you that aren't super familiar. They actually make one of these specifically for the Conturo. So you can actually take this machine and create a stationary edge banding machine. Now, here's what I'm going to say about that. I have it. I've used it probably 5 to 6 times since I've had it. But there aren't a lot of circumstances to where I feel like I need it. I would actually rather bring this, even though it's got, a fairly significant amount of weight, I would rather bring this to the material than me having to take some large panel and then try to maneuver it over a table that's small like this. Now, where the table becomes almost a necessity is if you're doing something that's thin, narrow like this. Let's say this is a stretcher for the top of a base cabinet, or it's a nailer for the back. Well, the back wood probably wouldn't need to be edge banded. But let's say you had something small like this, and this was in the front of your cabinet, and you needed that part because it's going to be visible to be edge banded. That's where having the table comes in really handy on narrow stock, because I can now push it through the machine, get the same exact quality. The reason why it's a problem is because, remember, we have this plate here. This plate has to ride on that material, and it also has to be clamped down or however it's secured to your surface. So that's where the table comes in really handy. However, it is not a necessity in the sense that, let's say that I knew I needed, 4 or 5 of these front stretchers for base cabinets. What I would do is I would just take a much larger panel, say 8 feet long, and I would edge band that entire length of that 8-foot panel, and then I would take it to whatever, or I'd use the track saw, and I would rip it down to whatever the thickness or the width that I wanted, and I could cross-cut each piece, and then I can get 4 out of one time edge banding one long piece. So the key is you just need to have enough material for this plate to rest on and have it not be a problem. Now, do I think that this machine is for everybody? Obviously not, and I don't expect a bunch of people watching this video to run out and buy this machine because, like I told you before, I don't even think that there's a need for me to have it. However, I have it, and I do a decent amount of frameless cabinetry because at this point, honestly, all I'm doing is remodeling my home, and we only build frameless cabinets. So I'm actually very, very glad that I have it. But again, contrary to popular belief, I am not a professional, right? I am an amateur. I am a very green woodworker. I am a hobbyist in my shop, just like all of you, and I have this. And I bring that up because of the justification factor. Like, a lot of people say, well, I can't justify purchasing that. It's like, okay, well, the only thing that you're using is your justification, the money? Or are you also bringing into the factor of being happy and enjoying the tools that you're working and making it a fun process? For me, that's the justification. So much so, with this tool in particular. So much so that if this was to break today, I would immediately order another one if it wasn't covered under warranty or whatever. I would immediately order another one because this is honestly a tool that I would not want to live without in my shop. I would not ever want to go back to ironing on edge banding. For those of you that say, well, why don't you just get if you do enough edge banding, why don't you just get a machine that'll do it all for you? Because I don't do enough edge banding for that especially. Because I do the amount that I do, I'm okay with spending the time trimming it and making sure that edge looks nice and perfect. And the other thing is I don't want to sacrifice the floor space. Okay, so that's another consideration for anybody out there. Even if you own your own shop, right? Do you want to sacrifice all that space, or do you want to be able to put something in a sustainer or up on a shelf like mine does, and when you need it, you grab it and you know it's going to work perfect every single time? So I guess I at least need to talk about how much this set costs. It is Festool's most expensive tool. It is their most expensive system, so brace yourself. $35.99 is the Conturo plus the accessory kit, which you need both, which is why I always quote $35.99. And again, it doesn't matter what website you go to, it's going to be this much. But accessory kit plus the Conturo. The MFK 700 set is $659. So you get the router, right? The MFK 700, but the set comes with the 1.5 degree base. Now, if you already have an MFK 700 and you're looking to add the 1.5 degree base to be able to trim it the way that I showed you in this video, that's $159. And then finally, if you decided that you wanted the MFT for the Conturo to be able to use this not only as a handheld edge banding machine, but as well as a standalone stationary tabletop machine, inside table, whatever you call it, that would be $889. So whatever that scenario is, add it all up. I think altogether, if you were to get the table, the Conturo, the accessory kit, and the MFT, you're looking $5,100, $5,200. I could just add all this up, but why do that? So, sorry if you were expecting to come to this video and have it be inexpensive, but if you've watched me for long enough, you would know that that's not going to happen. And that's not me, and that's not my channel. So, hope you enjoyed.